Empathy, to me, seems to be the number one key of leadership. People that I've worked for in the past, that I've really loved working for, has been empathy. And the times that I feel like I've been a good leader and led my team well has been when I'm empathetic to how they're feeling. And I don't know if that was normal for my dad's generation or my grandfather's generation. Probably not for my great-grandfather. But if I can put myself in the shoes of my contractors or my team members, ultimately we all want, especially millennials, we all want to be led somewhere. We all want to serve a greater purpose than just fulfilling a job or a role. And if you can be empathetic to that, I think you don't have to be perfect, but if you can at least try to understand what the other person's feeling, I've seen that to be really effective.
Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis. Well, today's guest and episode is with Evan Knox. Now, Evan is a millennial. I love having a diverse audience where we have individuals who are mature, more my age, and other millennials who are just really going into the marketplace and have fresh perspective. Now, Evan has traveled the world and now he has his own marketing company. But he shares his experience of working with other entrepreneurs, starting his own business. What do millennials or young people think and perspective, and what are some of the dynamics? There were a couple of really interesting insights that I hadn't thought about before. So Evan will be sharing that with you today, and so stay with us for that episode. Now, before we get there, this show is sponsored by Consulting Resource Group, which is our publishing company, where our focus is to help people with their self-awareness, self-management, and then, of course, self-mastery. I would encourage that if you haven't already done so, our focus is really to help others to realize their potential, and that our tools, resources, assessments do that, but also our e-courses. So if you already haven't done so, is that our encouragement is to look at our values preference indicator. Get clear about who you are. Our ability to serve others is equal to or less than our own development. And if you are an independent consultant or trainer, then the consideration is maybe think about our 3-day professional mastery and a certification, professional mastery and assessment certification, that's PMAC course. So think about the e-course. And you can do that virtually anywhere, anytime, anywhere in the world. And of course, that seems to be important now. And the other one is our 3-day certification coming up sometime soon. Whenever you're listening to it, we always have one every few months or less than that. So here we are with Evan Knox. If you like what we're doing, please pass it on, share it, let somebody else know about it, leave a positive comment on whatever platform you're listening to. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Success podcast. So here's our episode with Evan Knox. Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis. Well, I always like to have young people on the show. Now, young people is anybody that's under 50 as far as I'm concerned, who are successful entrepreneurs, but also making a difference in the marketplace. So I want you to give a welcome to our guest today, Evan Knox. Evan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ken. Thanks so much for having me. And I definitely qualify for the under 50 mark.
Well, of course, I know it's a little bit less than that. You're probably closer to my son's age, but that's fine. I just love energized entrepreneurs that are in the marketplace. Now, your expertise is around marketing in communications, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But I also want to get into your story, Evan, about sort of where you grew up, some of your history, and what got you into being an entrepreneur.
So I always grew up thinking entrepreneurship in some form or fashion, really even before I understood what entrepreneurship was, that was what I was going to do. And that mainly came from the fact that my dad had owned a business, or had one at the time, and my grandfather did, and then his dad did. So as far up as I know, there's either business owners or entrepreneurs, especially on my dad's side.
Now, Evan,
And so,
I'll interrupt you just so I don't lose some
great.
certain pieces here. What businesses were your family in?
All right, so let's go with my, it's funny because I was talking to my grandfather earlier today. So I was learning more about what my great-grandfather was doing. He had a couple different businesses, but his main one is he basically ran a cigarette vending machine company. So he would he had all these different vending machines that he owned, and then obviously, he would go in and have people come in and stock them or whatever. And then my grandfather decided, he's actually telling me today, it's the first time I've heard this story. I'm really close to my grandfather, and for those who have grandparents, you know how it is. It's just, sometimes you get stories a bunch of times, and sometimes you get ones you never heard of. So today was one of those ones that I had never heard, and I was like, wow, it's amazing. But he was telling me about how he got into he's in the jewelry industry. So like selling diamond rings, engagement rings, miscellaneous other things. And he had
cigarette vending, diamond rings.
Yeah.
Same grandpa?
No. So my great-grandfather owned the cigarette vending machine company, and then my actual grandfather, so my great-grandfather was the cigarette vending machine, and then my grandfather started this jewelry store in Atlanta. So my grandfather actually, I say that, and I was actually talking with a potential client maybe last week or so, and we were talking about he's a fellow jeweler, has got a several $million company here in the Atlanta area, and he was talking about when he moved to Atlanta, everybody wanted to work for my grandfather. Like my grandfather was like the most esteemed, most respected jeweler in the Atlanta, like all of Atlanta. So that was really cool to hear that because my grandfather's a pretty humble guy and had never told me that, So that was neat. So anyway, he owns a jewelry store, has several locations across Atlanta. Eventually, by the time I come around, he's downsized to one location. And then my dad was in the same industry, but he was on the B2B side. So my grandfather was on the B2C side, so the direct-to-consumer, like selling, watches, whatever, engagement rings, like I was saying. But then my dad decides to be a diamond wholesale importer. So he would get diamonds in from Israel. Like my wife's engagement ring is actually the diamond is from, like, my dad actually went to Israel and picked that one out specifically. So just super cool stuff.
Well,
so that
what dads will do for their sons, huh? Or actually, probably more the daughter-in-law.
Yeah, it's 100%, totally. I always grew up entrepreneurship. I remember, this is a funny story. I was telling my mom here's a little bit more backstory on this, is that I was at the barn with my mom. We didn't own a barn. My mom had horses, and so we'd go to the barn that she had, had horses at or whatever.
Yeah, housed.
Yep. And I'm 12 years old, and she's like, come pick me up on the other side of the field with she's riding her horse. She's like, come grab the truck and meet me over here. And I'm thinking, man, I'm 12 years old. I'm like, flying high here. I'm king of the road. And so I end up trying to back the truck up in order to turn it around, and I back it into a tree at 12 years old. And I come up to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I'm so sorry. I said, but here's the deal. I was like, one day I'll be a successful entrepreneur, and I'm going to buy you a brand new, Ford King Ranch because I know that's what you want. And she was like, all right, I'm counting on it, whatever. And that was the end of that conversation. Because it was like, I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. So there's a lot of nostalgia. Yeah, crazy.
Cover up my mom. Hey, Mom, just to make this not hurt so bad, I'll get you a new pickup sometime in the future.
Yeah, there's not going to sign a contract right now, or when, or how new it's going to be, but yeah, I offered one day, and I was like, she's like, I like my Camry. And I was like, all right, so am I off the hook now? So
yeah, for sure. The horses are gone, is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I think she has no desire to have a truck now. She likes her hybrid, which is totally different than the truck I grew up in.
For sure. Now your dad's doing this business of B2B. Did he stay in that business, or did he switch to something different later on?
So he originally grew up going and working for my grandfather, and then saw this opportunity where, I mean, it's all markup. There's markups at various stages of every supply chain to the consumer. But my dad just saw an opportunity and wanting to get better prices for my grandfather and other jewelers in the Atlanta area. And so he just decided to create these relationships and sell direct to these different jewelry stores. But he did that, until 2013 or 2014. and then kind of went and did some other projects of his. But my grandfather continued to have his business until 2019, and so he just handed it over to my uncle, which is kind of cool.
Great, which is your dad's brother.
Yes, that's correct.
I was just doing a guess there. I had no idea that that was related in that way. Now, what's your dad doing now? Is he retired, or is he still out there stirring it up as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, we're going to get a little deep here, but my dad passed away about 3.5, 4 years ago, right before I started Caffeine Marketing. And so kind of the reason why I started Caffeine Marketing, which is my marketing agency, was because I couldn't help, my dad, my grandfather was soon to retire. I couldn't help my family grow their company. So I thought, next best thing is to help other small businesses and entrepreneurs to grow their companies. So that's my personal connection to all the small business owners out there.
Well, my grandfather passed away before I even knew him when my dad was 16. So we have family can relate to your situation a little bit as well. So sorry to hear that. But at the same time, you've moved forward. And with that, what did you do, after our university? Like, where did you start with this entrepreneurial bent?
Okay, so here's the best part. So when I was in high school, I had all these, quote, companies that I was starting. And weren't actually companies. I was just, let's call it a freelancer, doing landscaping or helping people move or whatever. And I would hire my friends and to pay my friends. Obviously, none of this was like a formal LLC or anything like that. And my first exit, catch this, is I was 18 and I was about to graduate, and I sold all of my clients, my landscaping clients, to a sophomore in high school. So I sold them to an underclassman. So that was like my first exit for my, my company or whatever. And so I actually went from high school and then decided, like, this is kind of crazy, but I wanted to go do Christian mission work. I wanted to go serve people around the world that, I thought, at 18 is probably the best time to do this. I've got no obligations to a family. At some point, I would like that in the future. And so it makes sense to me to go off and I joined an organization called YWAM. It's called, or like WYAM, Youth with a Mission. And I went out and did missions with these guys for several months.
What part of the world were you stationed in?
During my whole missions experience, I went from Ecuador to Australia and Thailand, and I was in Australia for a couple months and then Thailand for a couple months. And eventually ended up going to Colorado to join a university program that was, catch this, not accredited by the United States university system. It was an international school. And so when I later went to get my degree after I had started my agency in 2015, 16 maybe, I actually went to school for marketing after I'd already started my agency. So because I'd already had marketing experience before that, and so I was able to, I had to basically completely redo my entire degree because none of the courses that I took were accredited here in the U.S.
Don't you love that? Well, of course, that's academics, and they don't always line up. And accreditation doesn't necessarily always mean something. I suspect that those other courses were valuable for you that you took, even though they weren't accredited.
Yeah, totally. And I think, having the experience in marketing made my degree in marketing really easy. So I was able to get the whole degree done in 5 months. And that was largely due to the fact that, most of the stuff I already knew in my capstone or whatever the last project's called was my own business plan. So I kind of got off the hook there.
Oh, cool. Now, let's just back up for a second. And, not everybody's familiar with YWAM, and we're not promoting it, but what were some of the, I'll call it, character traits that you learned serving and helping others during that time that would benefit the listeners?
I think the first thing that I really learned, and it was kind of an immediate rude awakening to me, was how not self-aware I was. And when I got over there, I'm thinking I'm all that in a bag of chips, and was very humbled that no one cared. I mean, it was you have people from all across the world that have come to be a part of this organization who are just absolutely incredible. And here I am, 18-year-old me, who's kind of not a hotshot in this community, but I don't know, this is like a big fish or a regular fish in a small pond. And so I go there, and everybody else is just these incredible people, and I just very quickly was oh, the world's everybody else kind of doing their thing. It's not about me.
And then, so what do you think you weren't self-aware about?
A lot of stuff. I mean, everything from body language, to obviously how I'm coming across. Growing up in the South, we hug a lot, and so when I went overseas, it was like, oh, you guys don't do that. That's like not a thing that everybody does. Not everybody like gives each other hugs all the time. That's kind of funny. And then obviously just like, just saying things, and then later being like, what were you saying? I think my own insecurity or pride, I thought I was concealing it well, and then come to find out not so much.
Yeah, I think people sort of figure this out a little bit quicker. Yeah, you did find out that in certain Asian cultures, hugging isn't quite as predominant.
Yeah, definitely not. But that's all fine and well, and I think relates to the business world. But ultimately, the thing I think that really changed my heart and my perspective was going over there, and especially into Thailand, and experiencing like real poverty. Like not necessarily for myself, but like being among just extremely unfortunate cases. Like extreme poverty can just like rock your world. And I had a lot of reverse culture shock coming back, but not to get too graphic, but like when you see somebody, like when you see lines of people as far as you can see down the streets who are all suffering some sort of kind of like physical ailment and are starving to death, and they're, one guy I passed by, his skin, like literally his skin had rotted off, and you could see his insides. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I thought the guy was not alive. And it was tough, and
Evan, that was pretty graphic. That was pretty graphic, Evan.
Yeah.
You said you weren't going to get graphic.
I could go more than there. There's actually more to that one. So that's like the PG-13 version of that, right. Surprisingly. And so,
with that, here's the other one. And by the way, I think you've cut yourself a little bit of slack, Evan. All of us that have been 18 at some time or another, there's a thing called maturity in life that comes to bear. So totally. With that, what do you think were the character traits that started to emerge or develop for you as a result of that really the listeners can benefit from just as we share your story with them?
I think gratefulness is the first thing, like going in there just being aware, and not a generic, I'm so fortunate, I live in a first world country, whatever, but just thankful for each day and the opportunities. And I also think I very quickly had to have grace for myself, and I wish a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners would have that same grace. We all make mistakes, and I, was coming to terms with how ridiculous I was at 18, which we probably all are. And just starting to bring that into picture, I'm thinking, you know what? Like, man, I've got to be able to forgive myself and also move on. I can't be completely rocked by people's opinions of me. I've got to be able to take them, chew on it, and then move on with my life. Because, at my age now, I still say stuff like that. Last year, I'm like, what were you saying? But I know that next year, I'm going to look back at 25-year-old Evan and go, man, what were you saying, man? Like, you just, but you have to just give yourself grace. And ultimately, the perspective that I appreciate about 18-year-old Evan in that moment is that he was looking out for like 100 years from now. Like I still, that's something that's still core to me. And I think that just grew in my heart, was that, business, entrepreneurship, as much as I love it and so thankful that I get to play in that playground, is that it doesn't really matter 100 years from now. Because truth be told, I'm not going to be here. And I think that there's a legacy that matters. I think that how you treat people matters, and my faith really matters to me. And so those things combined really, I think, fueled my desire to go overseas and do what I could,
Good. Well, thanks, Evan, for going and maturing up. I say that with a smile on my face. The other side, of course, is the word about, let's cut ourselves some slack. Those people that are listening, a lot of times we can be the hardest on ourselves, and that's really not going to be productive. Yeah, own up to it. If I screwed up, messed up, so what? Say that's what I did and move on from there, because there's nobody, at least that I've met, that's perfect yet, unless that's you, Evan.
No, definitely not me.
Of course, I'm messing with you. So now you go to school. Thank you for that. You go to school, then, of course, you go back and get your degree. Are you doing your agency at the same time?
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. I had probably had caffeine for about a year, and I decided I had brought my wife on, and we decided
hang on. Now, when did that happen? Where did you get married in the mix of this?
Thanks, Ken. You're pulling all these little nuances out that I take for granted sometimes. So when I went to Colorado, I lived in Colorado for 3 years, and I worked at a church there. I also had a sales job somewhere else at one point, and I ended up meeting my wife at basically the college ministry at our church. And we got married, and then literally our cars were packed when we got married. We said bye to all our friends, and I'm not necessarily suggesting this for anybody. It's just what we did. Golly, thank you guys for coming. It's been awesome being your friends for 3 years, because we had both moved there around the same time. And we left and went and worked at a nonprofit in Charlotte. And so that was tough. We completely left our community and everything.
Now, where did you meet your wife?
So we were at this awesome church. So if you're in Colorado, even if you're not a big church person, this place is just cool. I mean that. It's about 30,000 people attend this church. It's called Flatirons Church. Mm-hmm. It's in the Boulder area near Denver. And we met one day. Actually, she had dated a friend of mine. And they dated for like a month. And then about a year later, I was like, hey, man, what are the chances you would be okay with me asking out Missy on a date? And he was like, oh, dude, that'd be great. You guys would be awesome. And he just thought it was the weirdest thing that she was vegan, and just couldn't shake that. So it was his loss, my win on that one.
Oh, there we go. Hey, and then your grocery bill is a little bit less with no meat.
Yeah, totally. And then what's funnier is that, she actually starts eating, fish and then meat and all that stuff later on when we get married. And then all of a sudden I'm pretty much on a vegan diet just for fun. And so the tables have flipped, and it's really funny.
Okay, fun. So you're in North Carolina. Yep. Then where did you go after that?
So I think this part's key. So I originally was there working for this nonprofit, again, like just, making the difference that I felt like I could there. And that's where I actually got my intro back into marketing. And so I had kind of done some marketing with my grandfather, which, probably not a whole lot of marketing, and only learned a little bit, but that was my first taste of marketing. And then when I went to work at this nonprofit, part of my role became marketing, and then that became the favorite part of my role. And I ate it up. I love the strategy behind it, the math, and it's just really ultimately a math formula. I think people who are math, not necessarily math wizards, but those who like math often make really good CMOs, because they're all mostly numbers decisions at that point. So that's where I went from there. And then my wife and I decided, you know what, North Carolina's not for us. Why don't we move down to Atlanta, give that a shot? And so we moved down here, and that's when I started caffeine marketing.
And you're around a lot of your family members there as well then?
Yep.
So there you go. So thank you for that. So if we think about, communications, marketing, influence, and as we talked, Evan, just before getting on the show, we don't usually have a lot of marketing experts on the show, but I really want to support the listeners with, what are you learning, or what are you seeing in the marketplace as far as communications, and what's working and what's not out there right now?
I think the most important thing to understand, and I find this with all, business leaders or business owners, it doesn't really matter. I think if you understand the marketing principles, the actual tools themselves, they come and go, but the principles never change. And so if you're able to realize that there are 3 phases of marketing, and I'm just going to oversimplify them here. There's brand awareness, which is basically the point in the marketing funnel where people become aware of you. And then there's consideration, which basically means that they're considering working with you, but maybe they're not ready. And then lastly is the conversion part of the marketing funnel. And I just see marketing happens all over the place. So even with Missy and I, when we were possibly getting married, or dating and eventually got married, that was a marketing thing, because I would have never been able to, ask Missy out on a date if I didn't know who she was. And so I had to be aware, had to have that brand awareness of who Missy was. And then ultimately there were things that in the dating cycle that I was considering marrying her, but wasn't quite ready to make that commitment. And then finally it was like, all right, this is it. She's the one. Let's make the commitment. And so I see marketing happening all the time across various aspects of life, but I think it's really important to understand brand awareness, consideration, and then conversion, and keep it super simple, because what works right now might not work a year from now. But what I see working right now really well in the consideration phase of the marketing funnel, so that's the middle of it there, as we're trying to move potential customers and clients down to conversion, is retargeting campaigns on pretty much any social media platform. But I really like Facebook and their audience network and Instagram. So Facebook owns Instagram and a couple other properties. But that's my favorite. That's the easiest way to basically flip a switch on a business if they've already got some sort of brand awareness, to flip that switch and then really dramatically increase their bottom line in a really positive way. Another thing to try is the top of the funnel. So that's brand awareness and just basically making people aware of your brand. Like I said, Facebook is great with all their audience networks, but I also like YouTube advertising. So if you're able to create a really compelling YouTube video, those are really inexpensive right now because no one actually wants to do the hard work of making them. So that's a great one. But I typically find stuff that is overpriced. I wouldn't suggest like LinkedIn for most people or Google Ads. There aren't always, Google Ads is a catch-all term because YouTube is also included in Google Ads, but like Google search ads for keywords, that can sometimes be overpriced, and so can LinkedIn for different reasons. But if you have the right product, those can work. But I wouldn't say start there. I would say if you want to start somewhere, probably start with Facebook advertising.
Now, I just want to digress for a minute and get into some more general terms. What have you discovered as far as, we have a form that you fill out and you were talking about some qualities of leadership that you've discovered out there. What have you, at your age, what are you seeing in terms of, lessons learned, but also, the qualities of great leaders that you're experiencing as a millennial that you like and that you appreciate that seem to be working?
Empathy, to me, seems to be the number one key of leadership that at least I've experienced. So the people that I've worked for in the past that I've really loved working for has been empathy. And the times that I feel like I've been a good leader and led my team well has been when I'm empathetic to how they're feeling. And I don't know if that was normal for my dad's generation or my grandfather's generation. Probably not for my great-grandfather. But if I can put myself in the shoes of my contractors or my team members, a great example of this is that one of my team members and then a contractor and I were thinking about going to lunch. And this is not anything really crazy, but instead of saying, hey, so-and-so, would you want to come to lunch with me and a person on my team? And for a split second, I thought to myself, I bet she's wondering if that's going to be paid. Like not only paid lunch, but like if she's going to be paid for those hours because she's hourly. And instead of going, I'll just let her figure that out or I'll make her ask, I was like, hey, by the way, if you're wondering, the time will be paid that you spent with us. And so I really think that stuff like that goes a long way if we're able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, because ultimately we all want, especially millennials, we all want to be led somewhere. We all want to serve a greater purpose than just fulfilling a job or a role. And if you can be empathetic to that, I think you don't have to be perfect, but if you can at least try to understand what the other person's feeling, I've seen that to be really effective.
So clarity is important. And I think, of course, that applies to just about anything or any generation. Now, I really don't like, I'm a father of 2 millennials, so I have permission.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Great kids, successful like you are. Is there any, so I don't like generalizing. However, that being said, are there some strategies or leadership styles that really do put off the younger generation, or maybe that generalization doesn't apply in your experience? Yeah,
I think, again, I don't want to speak for the whole generation here, but from my experience and the millennials that I've led, and then also, having been one and worked for other people, I think we've just got more options than we ever have. I don't know that there's necessarily, we're just looking for great people to work with. I mean, there's the kind of what I mentioned about serving the purpose before, but I think that we just demand a higher quality of leader. And the reason is because at any time we can pick up a freelance job, or there's this entire gig economy where I can work, from anywhere. And we've had a very low employment rate or unemployment rate. So up to this point, it's been, if I don't want to work here, I can just get a job somewhere else. And so I feel like we've just are more likely to move. And then the other thing is, like, a lot of millennials that I talk to that, are in the hiring process, like we're, considering hiring them or working with them or whatever, they feel a lot of anxiety about commitment. And that kind of sometimes is frustrating, because I don't feel like I necessarily connect with that, but I see it a lot.
Well, maybe, even though you don't connect with it personally, maybe explain that for the audience a bit about where's this anxiety about commitment come from, based on what you know about it. Yeah.
Let me give you an example of what it might look like, and then I'll maybe my guess on where it comes from. So one of the people that I was talking to is kind of like a mentee in a way, but also somebody that we've used for graphic design for a long time, but we can't continue to use her on a regular basis because she needs to have her own LLC. She needs to be her own company. She can't continue to just be like a sole proprietor in this scenario. And so we're talking through what does it look like to make an LLC, et cetera. She's like, I'm just so nervous to like start one. Like, what if and she had like a dozen questions. Like, what if I decide, what do I have to close it down if I don't do it anymore? Like, well, how much does it cost? What if I have to change my name? And there's so many questions. It was like an overwhelming anxiety for her to commit to create an LLC, which to me was like, hey, let's just go to inkfile.com and fill it out. Call it good to go. But more and more I'm seeing things like, hey, I had to reassure her. I'm like, hey, it's okay. Like, you're not committing to this for the rest of your life. No one's going to think badly of you if you close this business. Also, no one will ever know if you like dissolved your company. I'm like, it's just so many things that I think that there's a fear of missing out, I think ultimately that's probably the biggest driver, is the fear of missing out, because what if something better comes along and she's not able to do that or whatever. So my guess is social media probably has a big factor to play. I also would venture to say that there's probably something to the generation above me pressuring my whole generation to go to college. I'm not quite sure what that is. I recently heard a statistic that the unemployment rate is higher for those who have a bachelor's degree versus those who do not, which I thought was interesting. So I don't know. I think the whole generation has been pressured to go through this entire funnel to fulfill
It's interesting. My wife works at a university, and of course her whole expectation for our two kids that you need to get a degree. Well, I never really thought that way, even though I have a doctorate degree, Evan. Now, here's the stats, and you can share this with another podcast that you're on. 60 to 65% of parents want their kids to go to university.
Wow.
Only 2% of parents want their kids to go to trade school. So trade school could include graphic arts, could include mechanical engineering, could include, being a plumber, electrician, carpenter. And guess where a lot of the jobs are right now? In that space. So it's almost like that generation, my generation. I'm not one of them because I wrote a book on purpose, so I have to kind of walk the talk, where, you need to get like this bachelor's degree because that's the end-all be-all. Yes, you do develop discipline, interest, social sort of connections, but so what? After $100,000 or $200,000 later, right? So,
unreal.
So rather than just permission, hey, if you don't want to go to the school there and you want to be an electrician, go for it. Or is it yourself? You want to be an entrepreneur right out of the gate?
I would encourage people to think of it as an investment. I mean, Ken, I don't know what your portfolio looks like, but I have to imagine you own something, either an index fund or a stock. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners own something as far as investments go. And if you look at this as an investment, either like a stock investment, or if you look at this as like a business venture, most times there's a pretty low return on investment, depending on what degree that you get in. And that was ultimately the lens that I was looking at it. And so when my wife and we got married, she had close to $100,000 in student loan debt. And then you add in the car debt, and we're right at $100,000. And so we paid that off after 3 years, but I mean, it was like,
good for you.
I don't know.
What does your wife do, by the way?
She is the office manager at a church in Atlanta. So she does not use her, and she would say this, she does not use her film degree from Michigan State.
Oh, it's pretty close.
But so I mean, maybe, I don't know. We were joking about it. She made a TikTok video, and I was like, this is not a jab at all. I mean, we're a good place about the whole finances thing, but like, I was like, look, you finally used that degree from Michigan. You know, like she made a video for her social media. And I was like, oh, check it out. You used your degree. Anyway, I thought that was funny. I think she did too. But
now, Evan, oddly enough, we only have a few minutes left, if you can believe it already. And now, before we get into the last segment, where can people find out more about what you're doing in your marketing and your profile?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect with me is going to be my website, so evanknox.com, just EVANKNOX.com. And then if there are business owners out there or entrepreneurs who might want to work with my company, it's just caffeine.marketing, no .com, just caffeine.marketing.
Where did you get the caffeine from?
I'm looking at a mug right now that I originally had the epiphany moment. And it basically was just, I just want to connect with other entrepreneurs and business owners. It's always been a passion to help them. And being one myself, I've got, equity or whatever in a couple other companies. And I get it. We're always hustling. We're always trying to work hard. And caffeine is often the thing that fuels a lot of us. And so I figured, hey, why not? Caffeine marketing.
I got it. I get it. And after I finished my 4th cup today, I concur. So, totally. Evan, one of the things I just want to flip the coin a bit. Okay. Well, I'd like you to talk to individuals in the audience if they're considering, being a business owner or an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. What have you learned in your journey that you would want to share with the people listening?
The first thing that comes to mind is, based off the conversation I had with my grandfather this morning, actually, would be start it as a side thing if you can. He built this incredibly successful company, and it originally started on the side. And I love that because that's kind of part of my story too. I mean, I was working a sales job and then very quickly transitioned out of that. But I think if you can, I've seen a lot of really successful entrepreneurs and business owners get their start by doing it as a side gig while they do something else. Because what that does is it basically, they have to give their sweat equity into it, but they don't have this huge overhead or this looming bills that they have to pay. That can all be covered. You can make more intelligent business decisions because you are not worried about money. And also when you're fearful, your frontal lobe is compromised by cortisol, and you're not going to be able to think clearly. So I would say start on the side if you can. Again, in that same vein, if you can, try not to go into debt. I know a couple people that are building really they're building SaaS products which require thousands and thousands of dollars to build. And so they're basically using other people's capital to do that. That's totally an option. But for most people, you do not have to actually, take money out of your own pocket to start. And if so, you don't have to do a lot. I mean, I probably spent a couple $100 in legal fees to get my company started. And then from there, I was already having people pay for the other stuff that I needed. So I think that would be super wise. And then another thing that I think I guess my third thing would be that a lot of people feel scared by partnerships. I've witnessed some of them go down very, very poorly, which has been super unfortunate. But by and large, the partnerships that I've been a part of have been nothing but a blessing. I mean, as long as you have great communication, if everybody has expectations and they're clear expectations from the get-go and there's just ongoing great communication, I would really encourage looking for a partner and looking for somebody who can complement your strengths with their strengths that are different. Like there's a guy in Florida who we've gone back and forth with working, possibly merging or acquisition or something like that, or just bringing him on. And ultimately, we decided not to because we both have very, very similar strengths. And so I'm like, I don't know what the value add is here for either of us. If we're both, we both enjoy the strategy, but none of us want to do the details, So I would just say if you try to find a partner if you can and find somebody that could complement you in that way.
Excellent. Now, Evan, do you have any sort of advisor or mentors that are around you?
Man, I did when I first started, but Not often. I mean, the people that I look up to, they are often just crazy busy, and I might have a meeting with them once a quarter or every other quarter. But there's so much to learn. I'm looking at my bookshelves right now. There's so much to learn from these books or these podcasts. It's like your podcast, Ken. I'm sure you're a mentor to countless people here. And I think that's a great start. But I don't have necessarily a mentor specifically. My grandfather is definitely my first mentor, and then my dad for sales.
I think he actually still is, because you shared one of the things that came out of your conversation today. So,
yeah, totally.
So there you go. Sometimes it's just subtle, and I love it when you have those kinds of relationships. And now that Granddad is there, helping sort of in the steps that your dad was there, that's great that you have that option. Not everybody does, and that's awesome. I'm sure that he has taken up that role and just loves his grandson immensely.
He does, and he's crazy about his great-grandson too. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's even makes it, more connected for sure. Now, Evan, we're already, wrapping up and getting close to the end. What final thought, word of wisdom, or insight would you like to share with our listeners today?
I think I just would love to reiterate the one thing that I said earlier. I would encourage everybody out there just to, depending on when we're still dealing with this or when this releases, I would just encourage everybody to have a perspective of 100 years from now, and that whenever you're feeling stressed out or overwhelmed or nervous, that does this really matter 100 years from now? And ask yourself that question. And if you're a leader of people out there, I would ask them, what's it like to be on the other side of me? A friend of mine asked me that question one time, and I love it because it will help you develop empathy for the people around you.
Well, thank you. So, Evan, thank you very much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken.
Okay, stay on the line. So, folks, you've been listening to Evan Knox, and if you want to find out more about Evan, go to LinkedIn, and he's there, or go to evanknox.com, or find out about his marketing company, caffeine.marketing. So when we think about life really is about making a difference, about growing, maturing, as Evan talked about, self-awareness and consciousness. So, take some of the insights that we shared today, or Evan shared today, and then apply that in your life or share it with others. Thank you, as always, for giving us your most valuable commodity, your time. So if you like what we're doing, please share, pass it on, leave a positive comment or remark on whatever platform you're listening on. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis.
Thanks for exploring the secrets of success with us. If you want to keep the momentum going, log on to crgleader.com. Scroll to the bottom and sign up for our inspirational emails. You can also take your success to the next level by following us on Facebook and Twitter and connecting with Ken on LinkedIn. We hope you have a great week and look forward to you joining us next time for the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Ken Keis.